Welcome back. After the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, drafting abortion laws fell into the hands of states. And as those new laws emerge, legal challenges may now fall into the hands of another player. State Supreme Courts are hugely important. And joining us for more on what kind of impact these state Supreme Courts can have on people across the country, Grace Panetta, senior politics reporter for Business Insider. Grace, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've done a deep dive on this issue. Why are state Supreme Courts so important?
Well, the vast majority of legal cases in the U.S. get filed not in federal court, but state courts. And in many cases, state Supreme Courts are the final word on all kinds of consequential criminal, civil, and now increasingly political cases as well.
Right. I think your piece that you wrote with Insider was that something like 96% of all legal cases in the country are filed in state court.
Yes.
And we're obviously seeing that play out right now with challenges to abortion laws, also issues with gun rights, education funding. We saw in Virginia, all of those things play out in state courts. So how do state Supreme Court justices make it on the bench? We know a little bit more about Supreme Court justices in the federal system. We watched that. We just saw Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson get confirmed. She was appointed by the president. The Senate confirmed her. But what happens in states?
Well, it varies by states. In some states, it's like the U.S. Supreme Court, where justices are appointed by a governor or nominating commission. But in many cases, they're on the ballot, directly on the ballot, facing the voters, either running in partisan elections like Ohio and North Carolina, where they run as Republicans or Democrats, in nonpartisan direct elections like Wisconsin. So it really depends on the state.
So there are states where justices run for office just like you would for a governor. You pick a party, you run, and then the people directly elect you, which is counterintuitive to what the idea of a judge or a justice is supposed to be, at least in the federal system, right? They're supposed to be insulated from politics, but these justices at some state Supreme Courts are the opposite of that.
Yes, exactly. They have to campaign, raise money, go out in the field asking for voter support to get on the bench.
That is fascinating. Yeah. So looking at all of the different ways that this happens, we actually have an election coming up in Maryland this year where one justice is going to be on the ballot, but it's called a retention election. And it's really people voting on whether or not they will retain a justice who has already been appointed, right? What exactly is a retention election?
Yeah, so in Maryland, Florida, Kansas, many other states, justices are appointed to the bench, serve out a term, and then go on the ballot. And the retention election is just a yes-no question. Do you want to keep this justice on the bench? These have usually been pretty quiet, low-key affairs, but in recent years, there have been more money poured into campaigns to get justices kicked off the bench, often for political reasons.
And looking at all of these elections we've had in this country, every state's allowed to make their own decision. Obviously, some are choosing to have a political process. Some are trying to insulate the justices somewhat from the political process. But what have we seen in terms of justices either not getting elected or not surviving that retention election?
Yeah, so a really interesting case study to watch is Kansas. 6 out of the 7 justices on the Kansas Supreme Court are up for retention this November, and abortion is going to be a huge issue on the ballot. In 2016, there was an unsuccessful effort supported by anti-abortion groups to kick justices off the ballot. It failed, but they may try again this year.
You mentioned abortion is going to be a huge issue. Obviously, the country is talking about that right now. But what are the other types of topics that Supreme Courts at the state level are really grappling with?
Well, a huge issue this year has been the redistricting process of drawing new political lines. In 2019, the U.S. Supreme Court said that cases over partisan gerrymandering or the unfair drawing of lines to benefit one party cannot be adjudicated in federal courts. So state courts have been at the front line and subject to resolving some really, really nasty political battles over redistricting. So elections and voting rights is another huge topic.
Elections and voting rights, of course, we saw that here in our own backyard in Maryland and Virginia, and we're heading into an election year in Maryland. All of the states just had to redraw their election maps. There are still battles that are happening over what those maps look like. Those actually go up to the United States Supreme Court, but more often than not, state courts, as you just said, are the final word on these major topics. And we're not just talking about elections and abortions. What about criminal law? I mean, that's a huge one for state Supreme Courts, right?
Yes, criminal law is huge. In many cases, it's the state Supreme Court deciding whether to uphold or overturn someone's death penalty sentence. Literally, life and death matters coming to these courts every day, and that we often don't hear about or think about.
Do you think that the average state citizen could name a justice on a state Supreme Court? I'm going to ask everyone around here, but I'm curious. Do you think?
Probably not, and I know because I'm very big political nerd, and I do not know a single member before starting this project on the state Supreme Court in my home state of Massachusetts before that.
That might be something we have to work on
Yes.
this show, especially as they go up for election in our region in Virginia and in Maryland. Well, Grace, thank you so much for taking the time to educate us and for doing the work on this. You can find Grace's work on Insider. She's written at length about this, and we're really grateful to have your insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll be right back on this special episode of In the Courts. Don't go away.